Yesterday, a billionaire was deposed by members of Congress inside his own mansion about his role in enabling the largest sex trafficking operation in modern American history. And not a single Republican member of Congress bothered to show up. Let that land for just a moment. Because what happened inside Les Wexner's estate in New Albany, Ohio today, and what is still unfolding across dozens of congressional hearing rooms, DOJ reading rooms, and federal courthouses around this country, and is a story that is moving so fast with so many explosive new developments that it is genuinely difficult to keep track. So let us slow down. Let us go through it carefully, because the latest chapter of the Epstein file story is not about ancient history. It is happening right now. Start with Les Wexner. He is 88 years old. He founded L Brands, the parent company of Victoria's Secret. He was, for more than a decade, Jeffrey Epstein's primary client and the person who made Epstein's wealth, his influence, and ultimately his crimes possible. Attorney General Pam Bondi told Congress last week that Wexner's name appears more than 4,000 times in the Epstein files. An internal FBI document from 2019, initially redacted and only recently made public, explicitly refers to Wexner as a co-conspirator. He has not been charged with any crime. He has denied wrongdoing. And today, for the first time, he sat for sworn testimony before the House Oversight Committee, not in Washington, but at his home, because the Republican majority decided that is where the deposition would take place. What did Wexner say? He said he was duped. He said Epstein was a world-class con man. He said he was naive, foolish, and gullible, and that he had done nothing wrong. He said he cut ties with Epstein before his 2008 plea deal. He said he was never presented with women for his sexual entertainment. He said he was never questioned by the FBI or the DOJ about his relationship with Epstein. He said he didn't recall answering multiple questions put to him by lawmakers. And what did the Democrats who were actually in the room say? They said they didn't believe him. Representative Robert Garcia of California, the top Democrat on the committee, put it plainly: there would be no Epstein Island, there would be no Epstein plane, there would be no money to traffic women and girls without the support of Les Wexner. Representative Stephen Lynch of Massachusetts said Wexner gave Epstein credibility and that there is no question in his mind that Wexner knew about Epstein's crimes and failed to stop them. Representative Dave Min of California said that Wexner's claim to have seen and heard nothing, despite being in the room with Epstein repeatedly over decades, was simply, quote, not credible. Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas said lawmakers were running into dead ends trying to follow the money, and that when the transcript is released, the public will most likely be left with more questions than answers. To understand why Wexner matters so much, beyond the fact that his name appears in the files more than 4,000 times, you need to understand the financial architecture that Epstein operated inside. In the 1980s, Wexner gave Epstein power of attorney over his personal finances. That is not a casual arrangement. That means Epstein could sign documents on Wexner's behalf, could make transactions in Wexner's name, could move money. Wexner has said that Epstein misappropriated $46 million of his fortune. But what the Epstein files reveal is that the relationship went far beyond a financial advisory arrangement gone wrong. Epstein used Wexner's credibility, his connections, his name, and his wealth as a social lever to open doors that would otherwise have been closed to him. And Ghislaine Maxwell, who is currently serving 20 years in federal prison, once described Wexner as being Epstein's closest friend. One of Epstein's most prominent accusers, the late Virginia Giuffre, said in a deposition that she was trafficked to Wexner. Wexner has categorically denied this. Here is a detail that deserves to sit in the foreground. Not a single Republican member of Congress was physically present at today's deposition. The committee's Republican majority determined where the deposition would be held and then didn't show up to do the questioning. There were Republican staff members present. But the people with the power to issue subpoenas, the people overseeing this investigation, were absent, while one of Epstein's closest and most consequential associates answered questions under oath. Democrats had to ask every question themselves. The deposition lasted 6 hours. The transcript and video will be released to the public. The committee says it is not done. It is following the money. It expects to call more witnesses connected to Wexner, including a doctor at Ohio State University whose name appeared in the files receiving payments from Epstein. Now let's talk about what else has been happening, because today's Wexner deposition is only one thread in a story that has been accelerating dramatically over the past several weeks. The Department of Justice has now released more than 3.5 million pages of Epstein-related documents under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which President Trump signed after initially opposing under sustained bipartisan pressure from within his own party. The release is the largest disclosure of its kind in American history. It has revealed a web of connections spanning royalty, politics, tech, finance, and international intelligence that is still being reported on, still being processed, and still producing revelations every single day. Among the biggest names confirmed to appear in the files, at least a half-dozen current Trump administration officials, according to NBC News' extensive review of the documents. President Trump himself appears thousands of times. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick admitted this week to having visited Epstein's Island in 2012 for lunch with his wife and children. He has said he found Epstein gross and distanced himself. Trump said publicly that he wasn't aware of Lutnick's trip and that he hadn't spoken to him about it. Navy Secretary John Phelan's name appeared on a flight manifest for Epstein's Boeing 727. Kevin Warsh, Trump's nominee for Federal Reserve Chairman, appeared on a list of people being invited to St. Bart's. Tom Barrack, the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, appeared hundreds of times in the files. Former Labor Secretary Alex Acosta, who approved the notorious 2008 plea deal that allowed Epstein to avoid federal prosecution for years, remains a defining figure in the story of how Epstein escaped accountability for so long. None of these individuals have been accused of criminal wrongdoing in connection with Epstein's crimes, but their presence in the documents, in varying degrees of proximity, has produced precisely the kind of congressional scrutiny and public pressure that the release of the files was designed to enable. And then there is the question of the redactions, because there is a scandal within the scandal here that has united Republicans and Democrats in genuine bipartisan outrage, which, given the current political environment, is not a sentence that gets written often. When lawmakers were finally allowed to view unredacted versions of the Epstein files at a Department of Justice reading room beginning February 9th, they were told they could take notes but not bring electronic devices. What they were not told was that the DOJ was tracking which documents they searched and which names they looked up. When Repser Thomas Massey of Kentucky discovered a document in the room with the search history of Democratic Repser Pramila Jayapal, a document titled with her name, the reaction was immediate and bipartisan. Rep. Nancy Mace called it a form of intimidation. House Speaker Mike Johnson called it inappropriate. House Democrats launched a formal investigation into the DOJ's tracking of congressional searches within the classified reading room. The DOJ subsequently acknowledged that it logs all searches made on its systems, framing the practice as a protection against the release of victim information. The explanation did not satisfy either party. Representative Massey has described the Epstein files as bigger than Watergate. Representative Jamie Raskin, after viewing unredacted documents, accused the DOJ of a cover-up. Representative Cynthia Lummis, a Republican from Wyoming, emerged from the reading room and said, "Now I see what the big deal is, and the members of Congress that have been pushing this were not wrong." Among the more explosive documents released in the broader file dump is a 2020 FBI memo drawn from a confidential human source. The memo, which was declassified and released as part of the tranche of documents, contains allegations that are extraordinary in their scope. The FBI is explicit that the claims in this memo represent the statements and interpretations of the confidential source, not verified findings or conclusions by the Bureau. That is an important distinction that must not be lost. But the existence of the memo and the fact that it was part of the FBI's own investigative files is itself newsworthy. The memo alleges that Epstein had connections to foreign and domestic intelligence services, and that he had developed a particularly close relationship with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who visited Epstein's Manhattan townhouse more than 30 times between 2013 and 2017, according to documented records. The memo includes an exchange from Epstein's own emails to Barak, where Epstein writes, "You should make clear that I don't work for Mossad." Barak replies, "You or I." These are Epstein's own words in his own email account in the official files. The memo also contains the source's allegation that Trump was compromised by Israel and connects Jared Kushner to various influence networks. The White House has rejected the allegations, and the DOJ has described many of the references in the files as unverified and sourced to unsubstantiated tips. No wrongdoing has been established in connection with these claims. But the memo exists. It was written by the FBI. It is now in the public record. Meanwhile, Ghislaine Maxwell, currently serving 20 years for her role in Epstein's sex trafficking operation, invoked the Fifth Amendment during her House Oversight deposition on February 9th. She attended virtually. Her attorney subsequently suggested she would provide a complete account if President Trump granted her clemency. The committee has not indicated any interest in that arrangement. Maxwell remains in federal custody, and the Clinton depositions are coming. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are expected to appear before the House Oversight Committee in closed-door sessions before the month is out. That is a significant moment that this investigation is building toward, and we are watching to see whether it will actually happen. All of this is taking place against the backdrop of the most consequential diplomatic moment in years. The United States and Iran have now reached what Iran's foreign minister described as an understanding on the guiding principles of nuclear talks, describing the initial discussions as showing good progress. Vice President J.D. Vance cautioned on Fox News that Iran has yet to acknowledge certain red lines set by Trump. Negotiations continue. The convergence of these stories, the Epstein files, the congressional investigations, the international diplomatic maneuvering, is not accidental and not incidental. The files themselves contain references to Iran, to arms trading networks, to surveillance technology deals, to international influence operations that stretch across dozens of countries and decades of transactions. The investigation is not over. The depositions are not complete. The reading room at the Department of Justice is still open. And the video and transcript of today's 6-hour deposition of Les Wexner, the man who made Jeffrey Epstein's world possible, will be released to the public. The question of what Wexner actually knew and when he knew it is one that those transcripts will have to answer. And then the public will decide whether they believe him. Because here is what this entire story keeps returning to at its core. The Epstein files are not ultimately a story about one man. They are a story about a system. A system in which a convicted sex trafficker was able to accumulate extraordinary power, access, and influence precisely because powerful people gave him credibility, gave him money, gave him a platform, and, when it became legally inconvenient, chose not to look too closely at what was happening right in front of them. That system is what Congress is now excavating, document by document, deposition by deposition, redaction by redaction. And the question that hangs over every single hearing, every single testimony, every single day of this investigation is whether the people with the power to hold that system accountable are actually willing to do so. Today's answer, in a mansion in New Albany, Ohio, with 5 Democrats asking questions and 0 Republicans in the room, was not reassuring. But the depositions are not over. The documents are not fully released, and the transcripts are coming. Stay with us.